Welcome to video 3 on Generative Critical Thinking. The topic we want to talk about today is living consciously and authentically, and it's going to build upon our 2 previous videos. In the most recent video, we looked at the generative aspects of critical thinking, where we move beyond applying critical thinking to what others say and what you come across in the media or other external sources, and apply it to your own narratives, your own thoughts, your own beliefs that come into play. In covering the application of generative critical thinking to the interdependent domains that shape how you make meaning of the world, we started with a close look at the way you make decisions, the quality of the decisions that you make, and more specifically, the wisdom of the decisions that you make. Then we paid attention to the kind of things you say with your internal dialogue, the stories and narratives you tell yourself about the way the world works and what things mean. These drive your judgments and assessments of people, events, and your memories of the past, of your past. All these interdependent areas affect your capacity to learn, whether or not you learn in ways that are helpful or not helpful. And at the heart of it all, it comes back to your core beliefs, as we discussed in the previous video. Beliefs around your identity, who you are, particularly what you're capable of and not capable of. And a lot of the beliefs that drive how you think the world works and the way that you create your world. Applying generative critical thinking to your beliefs is really the point as to why we take a generative approach to all of this. There are many conventional forms of critical thinking programs out there, but here we are developing your application of critical thinking skills back to yourself. And this really is why we created this program, the why of generative critical thinking as opposed to more conventional critical thinking skills. The outcome, or the objective, is to live consciously and more authentically. And by consciously, we mean that you have more self-awareness and that you have more choice about how you make meaning of the world, what kinds of narratives you choose, and what kinds of beliefs you want to operate from. By being a choice about this, you can self-author the way you make meaning of the world and the way you make sense of who you are in relationship to the world, rather than just being conditioned by society or living in stories based on what you've told yourself about your past and who you are today because of that past. When we self-author, we can start to choose who we want to become now and into the future. Rodin's thinker reminds us of the ancient adage to know thyself. Given the idea of knowing yourself, there are challenges. There are parts of ourselves which realize that, yes, there are things we need to know more about ourselves and why we believe what we believe. But there are other times when we think that we do know ourselves, that we do know what we're thinking and what we're on about, and we do know our beliefs. Well, sometimes we do, and sometimes we really don't. So there's the challenge. How do you learn about yourself? To know yourself, you have to ask that core question. How you answer that question is going to be a conclusion about yourself. But we need to come back to the premises leading to that conclusion. Now, keep in mind, when we start to examine how we learn about ourselves, we also get to find out about how we don't learn about ourselves. So there's a trap that we have to become aware of and avoid in how we go about trying to know and learn about ourselves. And that trap is narrative itself, where you get caught in your own narratives about yourself, where you think you know yourself, but whatever you're saying about yourself is another conclusion, another story, another narrative that's open to inquiry. We need to uncover and challenge the premises giving rise to that narrative about yourself and how you think you know yourself. Challenge many of the things that you say about your self-image, about your self-worth, about what you can and cannot do, about who you are in the world. They are, again, just more narrative. Now, the strength of the trap is that the narrative is very seductive because it feels congruent, it feels true. It's the story you've been telling yourself for years. So, of course, it's really familiar and you've got lots of memories to back it up. But what you really have are stories about those memories to back it up, not really memories themselves. We always have to realize that whatever you're saying to yourself about yourself is just more narrative. So, what's needed to avoid this identity story trap about who you are starts with self awareness. The self awareness needed is that in telling yourself that story, you are now both the storyteller as well as the listener. And we heard a great saying a while ago, which is most of the time when you're talking to self, you're mostly just listening. So there's a storyteller part of you just telling yourself stories about yourself, no matter how believable those stories are. They're just stories. And in fact, you're the author of the majority of your identity stories and your identity beliefs about who you are, who you can and cannot be, etc. Of course, not all your stories about yourself are self-authored. Sometimes they were given to you. Sometimes when you're growing up, people told you who you were, whether you're a good person, bad person, whether you're friendly, not friendly, antisocial, whatever. People tell you stuff. And if you didn't challenge it at the time, if you didn't have enough generative critical thinking skills at the time, which most of us didn't, we might have adopted those stories. But the point is, over the years, you probably embellished those stories. They probably gave you a plot line that you took on. Then you built up an entire odyssey, so extensive and so internally consistent that it could rival Lord of the Rings. Perhaps not nearly as well written, though. Now, we have to make this next point in bold. It's a big thing to recognize that when you're listening to your own narratives, your storylines about yourself, they're just narratives. They're just stories. They're just beliefs made up of narrative, made up of the way you make meaning of things through language. You've self-authored a lot of it, and now you're telling yourself that story. And you're also adopting the role of the listener, assuming the story is true. And it may or may not be. You really don't know until you inquire into yourself. So when you go into this program, when you start learning the skills of generative critical thinking, you're going to develop several competencies, which we call generative competencies, skills that allow you to continually reflect on yourself and be able to keep evolving yourself and upgrading your beliefs as you learn, mature, and grow over time. So when you go into this program, learning the skills of generative critical thinking, you're going to develop several competencies, which we call generative competencies, skills that allow you to continually reflect on yourself and to be able to keep evolving yourself and upgrading your beliefs as you learn, mature, and grow over time. There are many of these competencies, but we want to give you a quick outline for how this is going to look, and it begins with self-awareness. You'll develop the skills of what's called metacognition. In that, you'll become more and more self-aware of your internal dialogue, of your beliefs, of the ways that you go about making your decisions, and of how you learn about things in ways that are either helpful or not helpful. With the generative thinking skills, you'll engage in self-inquiry. You'll question why you believe some, or maybe many, of the things that you do believe. On what basis do you actually believe them? When you assert something to yourself, you'll check that assertion's benefit, or otherwise, and examine how and why you arrived at that assertion. One of the things you'll find over time is that there are many things that you say to yourself that are not actually based on much fact, if any. You may well find that many of the things you believe about yourself, your capabilities, your self-worth, what's possible for you or not, have little or no foundation. From challenging your beliefs, you may even find yourself in a state of not knowing, not sure what to believe, not sure what is true about yourself. You might have had so much conviction on being right about what you were saying, but now you realize, well, actually, I'm not right. I'm not sure. Accepting that you don't know at that stage is very, very empowering and is quite generative as a competency. Being quite comfortable with saying, I don't know, leads to more inquiry. And that leads you to greater levels of self-awareness where you inquire in more effective ways. Now, of course, if you don't take it much further, you'll simply keep spinning around, recognizing you don't know stuff. But we do have to live in the world. So you do have to have some functional narrative or story. So that's going to lead you now to the next set of generative competencies. You're now going to be in a place where you ask, well, what narrative does work for me? What belief, what storyline does work better for me at this point? And you get to self-author. Rather than succumbing to your conditioning or all your past reinforced beliefs and stories about yourself, what you can and cannot do, etc., you become more creative. And that leads you to choice. Of course, there are many narratives you could create. There are many types of beliefs you could adopt. But which ones do you want? This level of metacognition puts you into choice consciousness. And when you choose the narratives that you want to create for yourself, you fulfill the goal of generative critical thinking, living consciously and authentically, authoring the storylines that you want for yourself. Of course, some of these stories will work better than others. Some will be more empowering than others. Some would be more effective than others. Some will lead to greater happiness and fulfillment than others. And you will recognize through practical experience in living which ones do work better for you. What you want to reinforce for yourself is not the new narrative, because all that will do is lock you back into that narrative. What you will now reinforce is the fact that you have the competence, you have the ability to self-author and choose your narratives. And so you can live consciously and authentically no matter what's going on around you. And these are the generative competencies you develop with generative critical thinking. Okay, so in 3 videos, we've covered much of what distinguishes generative critical thinking from traditional critical thinking. We hope the flavour of what we've covered has given you a good idea of what is available for you in the program and what its benefits can be for you. Now, you have to expect that we'll tell you what's in the initial program that we're calling the Foundations of Generative Critical Thinking and what the price is. So please stay with me for around only 4 minutes while I do that for you. I have to emphasise that we think generative critical thinking skills are essential for a change agent in today's modern, complex and highly ambiguous world. If the term change agent isn't familiar to you, think leaders, managers of all types, coaches, consultants, facilitators, personal and professional developers, influencers, content creators of all types to ensure that what you are creating is founded on real, valid premises, and indeed anyone who needs to be able to discern false from accurate information. So what's in the program? In the program, there are 3 recorded, self-paced video modules. All up, this is 5.5 hours of content. You also get downloadable audio files of the video sessions, and these are great for reviewing without needing to watch a screen. For easy review and additional reading, there is a comprehensive manual. You get lifetime access. Now, we are planning to continue upgrading the program, but from enrolling in this course, you will get bonus free upgrades. So although the price will go up with each upgrade, that does not apply to you. You get it for free every time there's a new upgrade. But please keep in mind this is a first time, once only offer. To give you a very quick idea of what's in each of the modules, I'll just pop the main points on screen for you. Here are the main content points of Module 1. Now, Module 2. And Module 3 focuses on the generative inner work of applying generative critical thinking to your own thinking, beliefs, models of the world, stories, and narratives. So now you're wondering, of course, what the price is. Here is the price at the time of filming. Just a reminder that prices will change over time, particularly as we upgrade the program in the future. These prices are accurate at the time of filming in March 2025. For the latest price and any new special offers, please use the links provided. Now, I could reiterate what we think the benefits of the course are. However, I think we've covered that pretty comprehensively in the 3 videos. Of course, more information is available on the Generative Critical Thinking landing page, and there is a link provided. And you can always send us questions via the various avenues available, which are listed in the accompanying notes. Of course, Marvin and I think this course has a tremendous amount to offer. And naturally, we would be thrilled to have you join us in using and developing these profound skills. We look forward to seeing you in the program and working with you to be able to make a difference as a conscious agent of change. Thank you for watching and listening.